And I came back with good news, which is that wherever you go nowadays, more and more people are doing the unthinkable. They are slowing down in every walk of life. And believe it or not, they're discovering that, contrary to what conventional wisdom always tells us, which is if you slow down, you're boring, stupid, unproductive, lazy, you're roadkill. The opposite turns out to be true, that by slowing down judiciously at the right moments, people find that they eat better, make love better, work better, think better, read bedtime stories better. They live better. And this whole earthquake of slowness, right? People call it the slow movement, but it's super important. I want to get this out on the table right out front, that when people talk about slow, the slow movement with a capital S, we don't mean doing everything very slow. I mean, that would just be silly, right? I'm not an extremist or a fundamentalist of slowness. I love speed. Faster is often better, right? Speaking to you from central London where I live, I love fast. But faster isn't always better. And that's the key thing to slow. Slow with a capital S is about doing things at the right speed. So sure, there are times to be fast, but there's a whole range of other rhythms and speeds and tempos to play with. Sometimes the best policy is slow, to slow it down, right? So for me, slow is it's like a mindset. It's a chip that you put in your head, and you arrive at each moment not trying to do that thing as fast as possible, but as well as possible, right? It's like being mindful, being present in the moment, quality over quantity, all those things. And once you apply that slow filter to whatever it is you're doing, you're going to do it better, enjoy it more. So, that's kind of the origin story and the philosophy in a nutshell. But there's much more to say about it. Of course, the book came out, the first book, In Praise of Slow, which is kind of the foundation text of the slow movement. That's going back a few years now. But my goodness me, it's just as relevant today because people are, the virus of hurry has not disappeared, right? We've got another virus running rampant around the world, but the virus of hurry is still there as people charge through the day, trying to do more and more, multitasking and so on. So the slow movement is a very important cultural player, it seems to me, a way of reminding ourselves that we all have an inner tortoise, yeah? And it's important to be in touch with it.
Yeah, I think that the timing is perfect for this kind of consciousness, that the world has been speeding out of control. I would say out of control in a sense, and that this is perfect timing to be talking about this kind of thing, because all of us being somewhat held indoors, let's just say somewhat, it's in our minds anyway to be careful and everything. It's a good time to reflect, and you got to slow down to do that.
Exactly.
So I again, because this is my first interview, I didn't hit record right at the very beginning, so I didn't get the beginning of you telling about reading bedtime stories I got just up to that point. I didn't get that segment of that. So could you repeat?
All right. Well, just a bit about why I started slowing down.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, my origin story is very much a personal moment of existential crisis when I found myself speed reading bedtime stories to my son. And, my version of Snow White was so fast, there were only 3 dwarves in it. It was kind of, my son would be saying, where's Grumpy tonight? And I could feel this was wrong, but I just couldn't slow down. And I got to the point where I was on the verge of buying a book I'd heard about called The 1 Minute Bedtime Story.
Yeah.
So, Snow White in 60 seconds. And I thought, I need that book now, Amazon, drone delivery. And then the light bulb went on over the head. And I thought, no, I'm racing through my life instead of living in. And that was when I guess I hit rock bottom. And that's when I set off to investigate my own addiction to speed and the bigger picture and so on.
Yeah. So that's it. That's great. Thank you. So go ahead. There was one section of your book that I felt was interesting to me, which was the thought about living a life without these watches. That we weren't so conscious that we actually we ate when we were hungry, we went for a walk or went to see a friend when, we didn't schedule things, so to speak. We just go knock on their door and, so yeah, I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, but whenever you want, you know.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I think that's one of the drivers of our speed culture is that we have an unhealthy and neurotic relationship with time itself. And, sorry. And people, excuse me, people have been measuring time since back to, the ancients with their sundials and so on, but we only really got tangled up with time when we started with clocks, right? So even as early as the medieval periods, when they began to put clocks in the center of villages and towns, suddenly having time measured there in people's eye line changed people, changed their behavior. They began to feel like they had a schedule, they had to rush, they had places to be on time, right? They had to be up to speed, right? So that's going back hundreds of years. Then you come into the industrial era when a link is drawn between being on time and money, right? Time is money, right? Benjamin Franklin's famous phrase, the beginning, 250 years ago, that defined the industrial ethos, right? The idea that the faster you did things, the richer you got. And then the problem was in the Industrial Revolution, then that spilled out into everything we do. So that whole ethos of how do I get the most from my time? I'll go faster, right? I'll do more and more with less and less time. That spilled out of the factory and polluted and contaminated every corner of our lives, so that people now feel that when they're eating, making love, I mean, everything is, we're on the clock constantly, right? That's why people are going to speed yoga, classes, or drive through funerals. It's like everything has to be accelerated just because it's all about making it better, means making it faster. And so a big part of that is the way we regard and measure time. There's a phrase from an old Italian saying that man measures time and then time measures man. And it's kind of that flipping of the tables that occurs. As soon as we start measuring time too closely, getting too obsessed with it, we start to speed up, right? Which is why, casinos never have clocks, right? They don't have windows. They want you to forget the passage of time. Why? So that you'll slow down and spend more money. You'll spend more time there, right? So, and they've shown, there's a lot of research that shows that even just seeing a clock face makes us feel anxious, worried about the passage of time and so on. So if you'll notice on my wrist, I don't wear a watch. That was one of the things that was a part of my own deceleration and moving away from the cult of speed, was just to say, you know what? I'm not going to have a clock face in my sight line 24 hours. I'm just not going to do it anymore. I'm very punctual. I normally know what time it is more or less anyway. I have my time on my clock, my phone in my pocket. So it's there if I need, or I can ask somebody, but it's not there calling the shots on my left wrist anymore, right? And that makes a palpable difference to my experience of every moment of the day, I think.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, for a long, long time, I didn't wear a watch. And it was remarkable how almost intuitively I knew what time it was. And if I needed to know an exact time, it was easy to find.
It is.
Because clocks are everywhere.
Exactly. And people, if you don't have one, you can ask something. And I find that I've had some really great serendipitous conversations with people in the street, just sort of saying, do you know the time? And then they'll say, how do you know? Because it's so unusual not to have don't know the time. And so I've, met some interesting people that way. And it just, I think that speed and obsession with time, there's a metaphor here, right? It makes us selfish. It makes us self-focused, self-obsessed. It cuts us off in many ways from other people living in fast forward, being in roadrunner mode. And I think even just that small moment, that tiny ritual of stopping and saying, I don't know what time it is. I'm going to ask that stranger over there. Or I'm, and just that little pause moment can open the door to a deep moment of, human experience.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's the areas of our health, our ability to be creative, our ability to meet deadlines creatively, all of that, like you mentioned in the book a little bit about, and I'm not preempting this for you to say anything, about meditation, because meditation is covering the globe. So many people are doing it now because they scientifically, they put people in fMRIs, and read their brain
Mhm.
when they're meditating, and they can see that this is a really beneficial thing to be doing. It's probably what our ancestors did when they actually were living in nature. They probably just did it automatically, that they just could feel so much better or just connect with nature through meditation. So yeah, so that was good too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's the natural human state is to have moments of quiet, serenity, tranquility, looking inward rather than freaking out about what's happening outwardly, right? And that's a lot harder to do in a world where there's a smartphone in every pocket, where there's noise coming at you from every side, there's distractions, and obviously if you're in the state of nature, and we know that nature by its very nature slows people down, that they call it forest bathing, and just simply being in green spaces has a similar effect to meditation. It kind of can focus the mind and reduce the symptoms of stress and just boost general well-being. So to me, it's not in any way surprising that the meditation mindfulness boom has occurred in the last few years. Because why? Because the whole society has just got way too fast for itself. And we've realized that one of the main things we need to do is to slow down, right? For our physical health, our emotional health, and you could even say our spiritual health. Yeah. I mean, Socrates back 2000 years ago talked about reflection, those moments of pause, looking inward, asking the big, those reflection that's how you attend to the soul, right? Is in those moments of quiet, calm reflection. And that's something that's been edited out of many people's equations, right? Because they're just racing from one thing to the next, surfing across the surface rather than getting deep down into the core, to the heart of the matter. And that's slow and fast in a nutshell, right? Fast, you get from A to B, right? Slow, the journey, right? It's also the texture, the color, everything that happens along the way is part of the experience of the journey.
Right.
In a fast way of thinking, you just shortcut from A to B, right? You cut out all the other glorious detail in between.
Yeah. Yeah. You also mentioned in the book about the way we eat.
Yeah.
And the differences of going to a fine fine restaurant where it might take you 2 or 3 hours to eat, in the experience of that, or going through a drive-through.
Yeah, which again is a perfect metaphor. Again, we're in a culture obsessed with speed and efficiency, right? What do you end up with? You end up with a Big Mac at a drive-through McDonald's, right? Wolfing it down on the seat of your car in the corner of the parking lot, right? I mean, how less nourishing can a moment be? And yet those are the moments that we cram our schedules with, that are on the surface very effective because we get through it really quickly. But think of all the things that we sacrifice on the altar of speed. Food is a perfect example. Not only, when you slow down with food, you're going to get a better quality of food. You're going to get more sensorial pleasure just from the eating of it. You're going to get a better health because we know it's very clear that if you eat more slowly, the brain has time to recognize that you're full, so you're less likely to overeat. So I mean, the whole speed culture is, I think, one of the drivers of the obesity epidemic we see around the world, right? But something else happens when we take time with our food, and that is that we connect with other people, right? I mean, what is one of the ancient human rituals is breaking bread together. Whether it was around the campfire on the savannah hundreds, thousands of years ago, or around a kitchen table in 2020, right? It's the same thing. And the English word companion comes from the Latin words for with bread, because it's in those moments when we stop, we come together, we listen, we are in the same physical space, harder to do COVID now, but same sort of, and we break bread together. That is when we are at our closest with other people. And you have to slow down to do it, right? That's the secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I've kind of covered the areas that I was most pertinent, but how about technology? Where does technology all fit into this?
Well, technology is a tricky one. It's like a double-edged sword because mostly it's not bad or good, right? It's how we use it that matters. Your smartphone, obviously a lot of the real cutting edge tech from Silicon Valley is designed to be very addictive and to keep us coming back for more and spending more and more time rushing around looking at more and more screens. So in that sense, the technology itself is designed in a way that is inimical to our well-being. But even so, I mean, I have a MacBook and I have an iPhone, and you can use those things in a way that I would describe as slow, right? So just take my own use of a smartphone. My notifications are switched off all the time, right? I'm always on do not disturb. So I decide when I look at my phone to see if there's been a message. I don't get interrupted ever, right? So something like that can make a huge difference, right? And that's a choice that we all make with our phones. Though, just they did some research a little while ago showing that when two people are in a conversation, could be, romantic partners, boss, employee, client, whatever, parent, child, two friends, if a phone is visible in that, like on the table, visible, doesn't have to ring, vibrate, or illuminate, just visible, those two people will keep the conversation on a more superficial level, right? They're going to keep it on a fast level. So, because one of the person's thinking, oh, there's my phone, or what's happening in the inbox. The other one's thinking, is he or she listening to me? Or are they thinking about their phone? Or maybe what's happening with my phone, right? And just, so there's a simple hack there, right? Next time you're in a conversation one-on-one with someone, put your phone away. Like just physically put it in a pocket or a bag or hide it under a newspaper or a magazine, just something like that will make a big difference to the depth and the richness of that conversation, that experience. So that's a little thing we can all do with our tech that will make a big difference. And that's a really important theme, I think, is people often when they hear of slowing down, they think, oh no, I can't do that. Because they think slow means I've got to throw away my iPhone, ditch my career, and meditate 9 hours a day and become the Dalai Lama, right? I mean, that's maybe one version of slow, but it's not going to be everybody's, let's be honest. There are all kinds of ways of being slow, and often a small injection of slowness will deliver big results. So something as simple as, putting a phone away when you're having a chat, or when you get to the early afternoon of a work day and you think, oh, I'm just exhausted, I'm not focusing, and you power through that thing. People power through, you have some more coffee. No, don't. Stop. That's your body and your mind telling you this is a moment to slow down, right? Go away from your desk, go for a 10-minute walk, have a 5-minute nap or something like that, and just reboot, recharge, reset, come back, and you're going to own the afternoon by having that little moment of slowness. So there are all these levers that we can pull, some of them big and scary, but most of them small and approachable, right? That will make a huge difference by slowing down, just having little injections of slowness here and there through your day.
Yeah, yesterday, because I knew we were going to be having this interview, I thought, well, I don't know what time it was, 1:30 in the afternoon. I went for a bike ride on the trails around town. I was probably gone for an hour, but I've always loved riding my bike, all through my life. And I came back, I could feel the workout, but I had a bunch of other work in front of me, and it was effortless. I just went right through.
Exactly.
Up till, well, I think you and I were communicating, I was, because you were probably sleeping, but I was communicating at like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And okay, it's time to go to bed. And I just went to bed. I flew right through that other additional 6 hours and felt great.
Yeah. Well, there's a perfect example of that slow in action, right? It's changing gears, right? Sure, sometimes you've got to be in turbo, but in order to do turbo well, you also sometimes need to be in tortoise mode, right? So there's turbo, tortoise mode, or, lean in, but sometimes lean back. Yeah. And it's kind of be on, be off. You've got to have that dance. And when you get that dance of being on and off, fast and slow, right? That's when the music and the magic happen, right? That's when happiness takes off. That's when you supercharge your physical health, your emotional well-being, and also you get way more work done in less time, right? That's what I call the delicious paradox of slow, that by slowing down at the right moments, you actually get things done better, faster, and more efficiently, which of course is totally the opposite of what the culture tells us, which is if you slow down, you're going to get left behind, right? You're a loser. You better put in that 20-hour day. I mean, when in human history has someone done 20, or even 10 hours of productive work in a day? Probably never, right? You need to stop. Right? Anybody who's spent any time in a workplace knows that, out of all the hours we spend, it's a pretty small fraction that are actually productive. And it'd be more productive not to stay at the office or stay at your computer desk, powering through at a screen, thinking you're going to get there, because very often you won't. This is that paradox. Is just simply taking a break will allow you to come back and do what you did, which is just annihilate what's left of your work, right? Because there's a great metaphor, I think I have in the book somewhere, of those 4x4 puzzles that have a little square, a blank square somewhere, and you move them around to create the image. Well, that blank square is slow, right? That's the slow square, because it's dead, it's empty. People think, oh, that's dead time, it's down. But actually, you couldn't move any of the other pieces without that blank square. It's the little pivot that allows everything else to fall into place around it. And that's exactly where those slow moments you describe, whether it's going for a walk, reading a bit of poetry, doing some knitting, going for a bike ride, all those little slow things you can incorporate for free usually into your day. They're going to supercharge all the other hours that you think you need to devote to productive work.
Yeah, to productive work. And with that said, I know that there are companies that have put in sleep rooms or nap rooms. They put in meditation rooms, where they've got, aroma, which is also something that helps in, your physiology, psychology to calm down. Because we as human beings grew up basically outside, as a species. So all the aromas outside, our sensitivity to it is a connection. So it's companies are doing that and probably finding good results from it, more productivity.
I tell you what, those companies, and they are more and more numerous every day, they are not making those changes in their offices and their work cultures because it gives them a warm, fuzzy feeling, right? Trust me. They're doing it because it's good for the bottom line. And it's good for the bottom line because human beings need to slow down, right? They need to slow down away from work. They need to slow down sometimes at work, right? It's kind of, so it's kind of getting the right number of hours over a week so that you have enough time away from the coalface to do those bike rides, to read bedtime stories without skipping lines, and to eat and break bread with the people who matter to you, to sleep enough, all that stuff you do away. We need enough time for that as well. And then the other side of the equation is having those slow moments during the workday. So you get those two things, and things, it's going to take off. Just a quick little data point here. Last year, Microsoft Japan ran a 1-month experiment. They moved to a 4-day work week. And they were worried that it was, they wanted to try, because of course they've seen the stats and stuff about it, but they were a bit worried that it was going to be a bit of a weak month, let's say, but they felt they had to do it anyway. So they did it, right? And they found that productivity went up 40% in that month, 40, with a 4-day work week, right? So the proof is in the eating, right? The proof is right there that you can only squeeze so many hours of productive work out of a human being before that human being starts to suffer, and so does the company they work for. And so the wise companies are starting to say, okay, what's the right balance for us? I think it's really important to remember that there's no universal recipe, like a 4-day week. It's not going to work for every company. It probably won't even work for most companies, but the principle is universal. And that is that there are limits, right? There are limits. And if you respect those limits, the limits of time spent working and the limits of speed that you expect from people when they are working, if you respect those limits and make it work for whatever shape is right for your company, then your company is going to hit one home run after another. Yeah. And that Microsoft Japan example is a perfect example of that.
So I know we're, no pun intended, but we're a little crunched for time.
It's time again, coming full circle.
Yeah. Can you just touch on maybe what is happening since you wrote the book
Mm,
with this movement of slowness? What,
sure.
just
Well,
whatever you
I mean, the wonderful irony is that since I wrote the book, the slow movement has grown incredibly fast, right? I mean, it's just exploded into so every field of human endeavor in ways that I just, even at the time, in my wildest dreams, would not have imagined. So, there are now slow movements in every field of human endeavor, from, slow sex to there's a huge slow travel movement, slow fashion, right? If fashionistas are coming around to the idea of slow, slow photography, slow art, just everything. There's even a slow gaming movement, right? In the tech world, because the tech world, of course, these people who are on the bleeding edge of speed, right? They're realizing there's too much speed in the system and looking for ways to slow down as well, which is why Silicon Valley has pioneered many of these things like meditation, mindfulness, quiet rooms, napping. They get it. They've crunched the numbers. They've read the reports. They know that they need to slow down.
Yeah.
It's interesting that even in the world of gaming, which is generally seen as a pretty fast, speedy world, there's a whole slow gaming movement. Creating games video games, right? That have a kind of more gentle, serene aesthetic. Games where you are not about kind of fast shooting as many people as you can as quickly as possible. They're games with a kind of involving, complex narrative. Games even that you maybe make one move an hour or one move a day, right? So just kind of, again, that's not going to be every game from now on, nor should it be. But it's just sort of saying, okay, sometimes we got some fast games. They've been the whole show for up until now. Now, why don't we have some slow ones too? And so there's just a lot of interesting things going on, more and more around slow. And every time I think it's run its course, I'll tell you what, 3 days ago, I got an email from somebody telling me about this movement called slow swimming, a slow swimming movement, which is kind of getting out. You can do it in swimming pools, but the idea is really to get out into nature. The whole kind of swimming in, what they call it, wild swimming. It's not about kind of doing laps and timing yourself. It's about getting into natural swimming environments. Your senses come on. You're aware of the smells and the sounds and stuff. And I just thought that's, who would have thought slow swimming, but there it is. So I've never ceased to be amazed by people's ingenuity and creative juice, and the way they take this little slow, simple idea that I kind of put out there all those years ago and just keep moving in new directions with it. It puts a smile on my face and keeps me going.
Yeah. Great. Well, anyway, before we go, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to get a hold of you?
That's very easy. Maybe you could put this in the show notes or type it somewhere in the
Yeah.
very easy. I got one website which takes you for everything. So it's my name. So it's carlhonore.info. carlhonore.info. And that takes you to a list of links. So it's got my digital courses, my books, my TED Talks, my new workbook is up there. I mean, just everything you could ever want to know, probably way more than anyone would ever want to know about me. It's all there.
Don't be so humble. Come on. Well, thanks so much, Carl. And we'll have to do this again.
Definitely. I look forward to it.
Like you said, you've got 3 other books besides this one. So anyway, thanks so much for your time. Now, every time I talk about time, I'm going to think of you. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again soon.
I look forward to the next one. Thanks a lot, Ray. Take care.
Take care, Carl.